Chicago with the lead!
There's a reason why Michael Jordan is one of the GOATs. This man lived off competition and did not hold back anything when the lights were bright. And there's a reason why plenty of all-time greats from the 90s couldn't win a championship. It's all because of this man. So, by the end of this video, you're going to understand why it was never a good idea to cross paths with Michael Jordan during his peak. Let's start things off with none other than Isiah Thomas. You know him as the greatest point guard in Detroit Pistons history and the leader of the bad boy team that ran through the league during the late 80s. When Jordan entered the league as a young, skinny, and athletic player, Thomas was already one of the best players in the NBA. Zeke was leading a hungry Pistons team that was looking to win a title, but he didn't like the attention Jordan was getting as a rookie. So, because of that, he made MJ's life a living hell, freezing him out of the 1985 All-Star game by not passing him the ball. Years later, he made Jordan's life in the playoffs miserable by leading a Pistons team that clobbered MJ whenever he tried to score. Basically, at that time, Jordan was the victim, and Isiah was the guy dishing out the punishment. But his airness got better. In 1991, a stronger, better, and a hungrier version of Jordan led the Chicago Bulls to a sweep over the Pistons, basically ending the bad boy era. And as if that wasn't enough, he was rumored to be the reason why Zeke wasn't in the 1992 Dream Team. Imagine being one of the best players of your era and one of the best point guards of all time, but not being given an Olympic spot on a team coached by your own head coach. Well, that's the Jordan effect right there.
We can only go and move up. Right now we're looking forward to the finals and trying to do our best.
This was Thomas's only chance to win an Olympic gold because he was already getting older, but he never had a chance to do so. Eventually, his days as one of the top stars in the league ended, and it happened shortly after that loss to Jordan and the Bulls in 1991. Speaking of 1991, we can't forget about that title win over Magic Johnson and the Lakers. If there was a guy who symbolized 80s basketball, it would be Magic himself. He and Larry Bird helped keep the NBA alive that decade with their rivalry. But the biggest star in the league, both in terms of his on-court play and off-court personality, was Magic himself, because he played and carried himself with so much flair and star power. But in 1991, he and the Lakers were on their way out, even though they made it to the finals. That matchup with Jordan in the finals was what you'd call a changing of the guard moment. Magic was the old dog that dominated the 80s, but was not yet ready to give his doghouse to the younger Michael Jordan. Both players were different from each other. Magic was more of a facilitator, whereas Jordan was a legit scorer. Still, if there was something in common between them, it was their huge egos and unwavering competitive fire. But in the end, Jordan emerged victorious in that championship matchup to win his first NBA title. Meanwhile, Magic's career ended shortly after because of an illness. And it was only fitting that his last run to the finals had to be a moment where he gave his throne to the next generational GOAT. So, with Jordan on top, he had to face one of his peers, Clyde Drexler. If you're wondering why the Portland Trail Blazers didn't draft Jordan second overall in 1984, it's because they already had Clyde Drexler. They were so high on Clyde the Glide that they were willing to draft Sam Bowie over MJ.
Portland selects Sam Bowie, University of Kentucky.
That may have been a mistake, but the Blazers did well enough building their roster around Drexler, the guy many called only second to Jordan among shooting guards during the late 80s to the early 90s. So, when they met in the 1992 finals, this was marketed as a generational matchup between two of the top wings in the league. Both Jordan and Drexler were long, athletic, and talented wings who could score over anyone. In fact, that season, Drexler finished second behind Jordan for the MVP award. That was how good they were at their peak. But, as good as the Glide was, his airness was simply better. Though the Blazers tied the series twice, they couldn't do it a third time to force Game 7. The Bulls' firepower was too much for them, as Jordan completely outplayed Drexler in that matchup. MJ averaged 36 points, whereas Drexler wasn't too bad with his 25 points. But it was at that moment when people understood the big gap between these two superstars. To be fair, Drexler went on to win a title with the Houston Rockets in 1995 as the second option behind Hakeem Olajuwon. But as the franchise player of the Portland Trail Blazers, he couldn't win a ring because of MJ. Now, let's go to the other victims, who actually never won a ring, starting off with Patrick Ewing. The New York Knicks were struggling to get back to their winning ways. At that time, they had yet to win a title since 1973. But they had high hopes because of their big man, Patrick Ewing, who stepped up to become the Knicks' newest franchise superstar. And the Knicks took it to another level when they hired former Lakers leader Pat Riley as their head coach during the early 90s. But instead of bringing Showtime to the Big Apple, Riley brought a grit and grind style that worked well to the Knicks' advantage because they had a legitimate defensive center down in the middle. Ewing was an imposing figure who anchored the team's defense while also dominating on the offensive end. He may not be the first guy you'd think of when you talk about the best centers of the 90s.
Jackson for the trailing Ewing.
But he was just as good as any other big man in that era. Unfortunately, Ewing and the Knicks were playing in the East, the Chicago Bulls' stomping ground. They lost to Jordan and the Bulls in the first round in 1992, and then in the Eastern Conference Finals in 1993. They did get to the finals in 1994 when they beat a Jordan-less Bulls, but the Knicks lost to the Houston Rockets in the championship round. Then, in 1996, a dominant 72-win Bulls simply ran through the Knicks in the second round. Ewing never won a title because he ran into either Jordan or the Indiana Pacers. And while the Knicks reached the finals in 1999, they did so without Ewing, who was out with an injury. Then we have Charles Barkley. If there was someone close to Michael Jordan's star power during the 90s, it was Sir Charles himself. You may see him as the goofy fat guy making jokes on Inside the NBA, but he was a menace on the court during his playing days. Some would say that Charles Barkley was the second best player behind only Jordan himself. He was doing things no undersized power forward should ever do. Of course, Barkley wasn't just a dominant player, but was also a big personality who was always making rounds in several media outlets because of his outrageousness. And in 1993, he made the most outrageous claim of all. After the Phoenix Suns made it to the 1993 finals, Charles Barkley proclaimed to the entire world that God wanted them to win the championship. That's more outrageous than any of his guarantees on Inside the NBA. And it's safe to say that God excluded himself from that narrative. Michael Jordan and the Bulls completely outclassed the Suns in a series where they never trailed.
The shot clock and the game clock. Jordan, yes! And it counts!
Jordan, meanwhile, had one of the most dominating finals performances of his career, averaging 41 points throughout the series. As for Sir Charles, he never came close to winning a title. He later joined the Houston Rockets to form a stellar but old Big Three with Olajuwon and Drexler, but that team couldn't find the chemistry it needed to win it all. So, because he never won a championship, people often think that Barkley was a joke of a player. But the truth is, he simply ran into the GOAT. But Barkley isn't the only media personality who ran into Jordan. Enter the Knick killer, Reggie Miller. Today, you're familiar with Reggie Miller as a broadcast analyst covering the NBA. But when he was playing, he was actually an incredible player capable of carrying an entire team just by running around the floor to find an open spot for a shot. He was the original star sharpshooter in the NBA, and that's why he used to be the three-point king before Ray Allen, Stephen Curry, and a lot of other shooters left his record in the dust. But Miller wasn't just a shooter. He was also a fierce competitor who brought the best of his game out during the playoffs. And it was incredible that he and the Pacers pushed the Bulls back against the wall in 1998 and forced their series to 7 games. Other teams with better superstars were never able to accomplish this, but Miller and the Pacers did. Unfortunately for Reggie, Jordan outlasted him in the Eastern Conference Finals in 1998 to reach the NBA Finals, foiling what could have been Miller's first shot at a title. Today, a lot of people credit Jordan for Miller being ringless. In fact, in 2000, Miller got to the finals only to see a Jordan clone named Kobe Bryant beating them for the championship. Miller never got close to a title ever again, even though he often believes the Pacers had a chance to do so during the 2004-05 season before the entire Malice in the Palace fiasco. Finally, we have the legendary duo of John Stockton and Karl Malone. John Stockton is the all-time leader in assists and steals, whereas Karl Malone used to be the second in the all-time scoring list before going down to the third spot. That's not all. They revolutionized the pick and roll into what it is today. They made the Stockton to Malone phrase an inevitable thing during that era. So if you look at those accomplishments and numbers, you'd think this duo won a championship together. But you'd be wrong. You see, Stockton and Malone almost always ran into a better team during the 90s, even though the Utah Jazz were consistently competitive.
For Malone! Oh!
Then, they found their groove during the late 90s when these relics from the 80s era outlasted everyone with their incredible longevity and chemistry. The Jazz dominated the West throughout the latter half of the 90s, and it was almost a sure thing that they would make it to the finals. Unfortunately for them, Michael Jordan and the Bulls were almost always waiting for them in the finals as well. The Jazz faced the Bulls twice in a row, and there were a lot of incredible and memorable moments in those finals. But, unfortunately for Stockton and Malone, those moments were almost always in favor of Michael Jordan. From the legendary flu game to the shot, Jordan seemingly always had the Jazz's number. Sure, Utah made life difficult for the Bulls because they played strong defense, but MJ always found a way to shine the brightest, especially when he stole the ball from Malone and hit the game-winning shot in Game 6 of the 1998 Finals. Stockton stayed with the Jazz his entire career until his retirement as a 40-year-old veteran in 2003. Meanwhile, Malone had one last run during the 2003-04 Lakers when he joined Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant over at LA. But the Lakers lost to the Pistons in the 2004 Finals, forcing an old, weary, and injured Malone to retire without a ring.